Hi, Jason. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. I see some people joining you. Randall's there. Hi, Randall. I don't know. I think you should be able to see the comment here too. So there's, yeah, Randall's there. Someone's from Greece. Hello, Sarab. Hello, Beverly from Canada. Yeah, so thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. We really appreciate this. So, Jason's here. He's a psychotherapist and actor and many, many other things. So, he's a very interesting person who I met on LinkedIn. So, Jason, instead of me introducing you and messing something up, why don't you introduce yourself?
That was a great introduction. I can't really
Oh,
beat it.
okay, in case I missed
I
something.
am. No, that's pretty good. That's great. I'm a psychotherapist. I'm licensed in New York, Florida, and Georgia. I also happen to be an actor, writer, and a musician.
Wow, that's a lot. Wow, writer and musician. When you say writer, like, do you write books or like what particular the stuff do you write about?
I've co-written a parenting book. I've written a number of different articles related to counseling. I was a script
Uh-huh.
consultant on a TV show called The Mind of a Murderer from a few years
Oh,
ago, and write
yes.
I write some fiction for TV. So that's a little bit of the background that I have on it.
Cool. So yeah, guys, I'll have Jason give me the link to his like video reel. So he emailed me a reel of all his clips he's done. I was like, wow, that's cool. Jason can actually act. It's actually cool. So you guys should check that out. I like it. I
Thanks.
was like, I might have seen Jason in one of the movies. I just like forgot, but he looks familiar. Yeah. So let's Jason. Why don't we talk about so you're right now you mainly do psychotherapy, right? So like do you only accept clients in the two state that you talk about, or do you also do virtual well, right now I guess you have to do it virtually, right? But then can you
Right.
accept clients anywhere in the US?
Well, technically speaking, I'm licensed in 3 states. So in those three
Okay.
states, I can be anywhere. If I'm licensed in the state of the client, I can work with them. So right now, if a client calls me from Georgia, New York, or Florida, and it would be remote right now because I'm not seeing anybody in person, I can
Oh,
work with
okay.
them.
Okay. And then what is your specialty? I know we're going to talk about trauma and money, but what do you have a special particular stuff you specialize that you're really good at to actually help people? And yeah.
I believe so. Trauma is definitely one of the things that I work a lot with. I have a lot of experience working with trauma, substance
Hmm.
abuse, and chronic mental health conditions.
Wow.
I certainly work with people who just sort of need life coaching and maybe depressed. A lot with relationships and parenting. I'm the son of two psychoanalysts, and my mother
Wow.
I would consider my mother the parenting expert. So I take a little bit after
Okay.
her. So I'd say those are the areas that I sort of specialize in.
Okay, so actually yesterday I had a financial psychologist came on live with me. I don't know if you saw that, but Dr. Brad Klons, he's pretty well known in the in the financial professional community. So we were talking about like how do you teach kids when it comes to money raising money. So I don't have kids and I will never have kids, so I'm not an expert in no way in parenting and kids. So then we are talking about like yeah, should we teach them the concept of earning money? It's like they have to do chores to earn their allowance. So Dr. Brad said, yeah, maybe that might not be a good idea because then they might, when they become an adolescent, they start making money. They're like, oh, you don't have to pay me. I'm making money now because they don't want to do the chores. So he said that they have to do both the allowance, they give allowance, and then they have to do the chores. Regardless if you get paid or not, you have to do the chores. So I am curious, like, what do you think about that? Yeah, in terms of money, teaching kids about money, and then because it's very close to parenting. I think all parents should teach their kids about money while growing up, and that's a very, very important life skill to have. So I'm curious to know your opinion.
Sure, it's very important. I happen to agree with him. I think the problem is if a child feels that they have to get paid for everything they do, that's not going to work out well when they become adults. So it's sort of setting
Mm-hmm.
them up for failure that way. I think giving them allowance, you can teach them the value of money, and you can also teach them the value of being responsible to your family too. So a lot of parents do get into that trap that he mentioned because suddenly the child thinks they're entitled to get paid for everything. And that doesn't really work in the
Mm-hmm.
real world. And it certainly doesn't work in your family. Typically, at some point, your parents have an expectation that you're going to help out because that's part of the deal. So it's
Mhm.
an interesting concept, and I think a lot of people have actually missed it.
Yeah, so Rocky asked, did you study forensics?
Did I study forensic? Great question. I have a lot of experience with it. I would say, while I haven't taken a specific forensics course, I have a very vast array of training in psychology. And because I've worked in psych hospitals and lockdown facilities, and I've worked with juvenile justice and adult justice clients, I've also worked in treatment centers. I have a pretty vast level of experience and training, in my view. And I'm a fan of forensic stuff, like everybody else. Forensic Files is a show that I've watched, and ironically, as an actor, I've been on more of those shows than any other.
Good. So Rocky has another question. So Rocky, it seems like you're familiar with this space. So he said, I'm able to journal through BetterHelp app, and I'm wondering how I can apply those notes in California. I'm not sure what he meant if you understand the question because I'm not familiar with that space.
If he said the BetterHelp app, that's so there's two or three apps right now that are people
Mm-hmm.
using for, let's call it, counseling or psychotherapy. There's
Mm.
Talkspace, which was promoted by Michael Phelps, and BetterHelp is the other one. So people can
Oh.
get sort of online
Mm-hmm.
counseling, uh, a lot of it by text messaging and by messaging. Some of it's video chat, like
Mm-hmm.
we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
people who are licensed in the state of California can provide to anyone in the state of California, if that's what he's asking.
Yeah, hopefully that answers your question, Rocky. And then, so you said you're a life coach and a psychotherapist. So if you're a life coach can pretty much serve anyone, right, in the world. So can you kind of practice like independently, or is like because you're a psychotherapist, so that kind of applies to your life, the rules kind of apply to life coaching that you can only serve in those three states.
Well, I would have to say that I'd be very careful with what I do. Life coaching, there really isn't any regulatory body. There's no license for it. You can't lose a license either. When I work with a
Mm-hmm.
client, even if they're in the state where I'm licensed, I'm always careful to think about, am I the appropriate fit for the client? Can I serve their needs? Being ethical clinically is really important. I do get calls sometimes from people from other states who just want straight coaching. There's no therapeutic aspect. So that's something I can look
Mm-hmm.
at a little differently. But I generally have a coaching bent to my practice, even though I have a lot of training in a couple of areas. Psychoanalytic, I was trained as a school psychologist. I want the therapy to be very functional. So it's not all
Mm-hmm.
sit down, lie on the couch, and tell me about your mother and your father. Part of it's very
Mm-hmm.
much the coaching end to see how we can get you to the next step.
Got it, got it. Yeah. See, okay, I had experience like growing up, so I didn't really have a good, when I immigrate to the U.S. I think part of being an immigrant at 20 years old, and then like and then no friends, new country, and then it was a very sad, lonely, and depressing time for me. And then I actually wrote an article. I am an immigrant, talking about that, and then not to mention to add to that, I was kicked out from my home, and then for whatever reason, so I was on my own at age 20, so I pretty much was really on my own. I had to pick myself out. I had to go to school, work full time, go to school at night. So it was very, very hard. And then so it took me a long time to actually go to therapy because, like, in my culture, the Asian culture in the Philippines, like, therapy isn't really accepted. Like, I think I tried to talk to my aunt, like, I was depressed. I was trying to tell her, I feel depressed. And to her, she's like, why don't you just do something fun? Like, what do you want to do? Like, why are you like depressed? Like, it's like, they don't understand, and
Right.
that only made me feel worse. So here in America, it's more open, right? So I think when I start looking into that, like how to get help, so I started going into therapy, and then I don't know, I really don't know, like I just never felt like it really helped me. Maybe I didn't find the right therapist or psychotherapist, and then for a long time I was kind of alone. I had to deal with myself. But then what really shifted for me actually was finding a really good life coach and finding spirituality in 2015, 2016, and then that's when my life shifted. So I don't really know, like maybe I just never found the right the right person for me or whatever. But yeah, it's very
Mm-hmm.
hard, especially when you just move to a new country. So anyway, so yeah,
Very,
I actually
very tough. Yes.
the reason I actually brought that up is that I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Like, if you're looking for a life coach or a therapist, like, how can you find the right one? Because then it's not like you can see reviews. I mean, is there a review for therapists? They're like,
Some people,
or like,
yes, some people
yeah.
have, some therapists have reviews. I don't do that because I really think clinically, client, I could ask my clients and they'd give it to me, but I don't want them to have to do that. I think the
Hmm.
therapeutic relationship is very private. I think what people can do is that there's a couple of things. For therapy, I say one of the things you can do is look up on psychologytoday.com. That's one way you can
Hmm.
find, there's listings for therapists and there's pretty good profiles. So you can sort of see, is
Hmm.
this someone I might match well with? Do an
Hmm.
initial session with someone and you'll get a feel for them. That's what I tell
Hmm.
clients. You'll know right off the bat if you click with the person. And I think the therapeutic relationship, the bond that gets built, is important. Life coach or
Yep.
therapist, I think that
Yep.
click is so important. And
Yep.
I think
Exactly.
you got to go through the process a little bit. And again, it's, you know, just like a restaurant, it doesn't always work out the first time. Sometimes you have to go again. Sometimes you have to go look
Hmm.
for another restaurant, and it's the same with
Yep.
therapists. But there's a lot of great ones out there.
Yeah. Okay. So I know you're talking about traumas and getting unstuck. So what made you particularly so interested in this? So I know you're talking about you got unstuck. You started your acting career at 47. You went through some trauma. So I'm curious and interested, like what inspired you to go this route, and then like what are some of the stuff that people get stuck on that you have to help them out of? What are the common traumas and stuff that leave people stuck? Because I actually have my own personal experience to share with you about some people I know, but I'm curious to know your story.
Sure. Well, I have a unique background because when I was a child, before I was 10
Mhm.
years old, both of my parents became psychoanalysts. They both went and did their doctoral training. So by the time I was about
Wow.
8, both my parents had their doctorate and were practicing. So
Wow.
I saw a lot when I was growing up, and being around my
Yeah.
parents and their practices and their two institutes, I got very involved in that area. So I always had an idea that I would become a therapist, but it actually didn't happen until I was about 35 years old. It happened 10 years
Mhm.
after graduate school. And I actually ended up mentoring a student of my mother's who was working on his dissertation and
Mhm.
knew so much about substance abuse, chronic mental health. And I actually didn't have that experience. I had a different end of training. So that got me
Mhm.
into the field. And from there, it just sort of blew up. And I started realizing I had more experience and knowledge to work with and handle trauma. Working in a lockdown psych unit, you learn a lot. You learn to act and react on your feet very quickly. And what I started to
Mhm.
really see was how much trauma people had been through when I would do psychosocial histories. And certainly the ability to give somebody some support and care and empathy, which they seem to have been lacking, is a unique experience. And I found that people, even after leaving the facility, would come back to the outpatient. And when they would see me, they would come up to me, thank me for sitting with them. So it just sort of grew from there. And I
Mhm.
realized I had
Yeah.
somewhat of a facility with it. So that's part of the story, you know, for me, was going through that experience and helping someone write their dissertation. And I got exposed to so much more than I had known. So
Yeah.
that's the first part
So
of how it started.
good. So actually, Jason, I actually realized this, from someone, a personal friend of mine. Like, so I realized that people who actually grew up unscat, like, they seem to have it all, whatever. They never really experienced any challenges in life, but then later on, maybe in their 40s, they just first experience their, whatever challenge, like maybe the housing bubble, they lost their job, the coronavirus. Then they have a hard time getting out of it. But when people grew up with already a lot of challenges, maybe depressed, whatever, and then part of me, when I feel like where I'm so resilient right now, is because of how I grew up. I experienced such a long time being lonely and depressed, and I just had to keep pushing myself every single day. Like, I didn't have any help. Like, life is not like that anymore. So I'm just curious, like, what do you think of that? Like, I think it's better for some people maybe to grow up. Like, how as a parent can you teach your kids to become resilient? Because if you make life too easy for them, they might not learn the life skills or tools. So later on, maybe then in 40s, like, I don't know, they lost their job, coronavirus happened, and all of a sudden, like, oh crap, I have a huge mortgage, I can't find a job. Then, then they might commit suicide, because that has happened in the housing bubble, right? So I'm curious to know your thoughts around that.
Well, I think that people have to learn first as children, parents have to be able to say no to their children. And that's something that we have seen.
No, no, no.
That's where we've seen a lot of problems with.
Oh,
Uh, and
okay.
ironically, the name of the book that I wrote with my mother called "You Can Say No and Your Child Will Still Love You." A lot of parents didn't say no to their kids, so their children don't build resiliency. They can't handle adversity, and my
Mhm.
running line about it is if you can't handle certain things at home and you're going to have a tantrum every time you don't get what you want, it's not going to work out well if you go to work at Apple or Microsoft
Yeah,
or wherever you go.
yeah.
So we're seeing a lot of that. So children who go through adversity and challenges and can build from it, and again, personality
Mhm.
has something to do with it. They seem to
Mhm.
succeed well. The term that we hear a lot nowadays, certainly over the last 15 years, is failure to launch, which is
Mm.
children who have really not progressed maturationally into adulthood, even though their chronological age would clearly indicate that they should have already. So
Yep.
we've been
You know
struggling
that.
with this for a while.
Yeah. So that actually brings to mind, yes, I think it's also partly, I guess, the parents' fault as well. Maybe they didn't have any parental education, because like it's not like something you just learn. You kind of have to learn while you have a kid, right? You learn as you go. So actually I went hiking this past Sunday with my partner and my two dogs. So there's literally this parent with one boy. I don't know how old he is, but he's like this tall waistland. So he was crying the entire time and saying, "No, mommy, I don't want to go. I don't want to go out," like crying the entire time. And then the dad was just like, "Please, come on, it's just up there. It's only 2 miles." So he was probably begging the child. And then here I was like, couldn't you just like demand and said, like, if I was you, I was like, okay, I'm gonna leave you, and then there's bears gonna eat you if you don't walk with us, and then just leave and then just walk, and then kind of just like at the next to your head, like just watch the kid. But because I just feel like they're just letting the kid get away with it. So it's like I don't know. It's I feel like a lot of parents kind of become slaves to their kids already. So in a way
That
that
is what
we have to
happens.
train the parents as well, right? Right?
The parents
Yeah.
have to do the work. Most of the time I get a call regarding a child or a young adult, teenager. I typically, even though I have all the training I believe that I would need, I work with the parents first, because the parents have to work at what they need to, because they're having trouble setting boundaries and limits. So if they don't do what they need to, and again, it's in books and it's also innate for people. Some parents have a different style. I think what we have to understand is, we talk about trauma, right? Well, the trauma
Mhm.
and the way that people were raised and how they grew up may very well affect their parenting. Children
Mhm.
who came from parents of, let's say, World War II, the Great Depression, Holocaust, they parented a particular way. The next
Yeah.
generation of parents, what seemed to happen is they tried to give their children everything so their children would be happy. The result is
Yeah.
we have a mental health crisis. We've had it for years.
Oh,
There are more
yeah.
children and adults who are suffering, suicidal, using drugs, substances, overeating, etc., and self-harming, and they're unhappy. So, no matter how much money you have, it's not a guarantee for happiness. We've seen
Yeah.
that clearly.
Oh yeah, and actually before we go to my next hike, so I love what Ken said. My parents told me no, and I adore my parents dearly. Oh, that is oh, that's a very cute statement. Okay, so yeah, so money can make you happy. So okay, I post this a lot. Like I did a post about, yeah, money might not buy you happiness, but a lot of your happiness depends on having money. Then and some people confuse that, like money can buy happiness. You got your ethics all wrong, but then like I feel like those are two separate things. So you have to be psychologically healthy to be able to appreciate what money can give you. So if you're not mentally healthy, you're just unhappy inside, no amount of money can make you happy for sure. So but then if you're already mentally healthy, psychologically healthy, I believe, you need money to buy a lot of things. And then a lot of the things we need for happiness do need money. For example, you can't be happy if you don't have shelter. You can't be happy if you have no food. You can't be happy if you can't visit your parents or whatever on the East Coast or in Asia, whatever, if you don't have money. So you need money. And then I know some people made comments that was like funny, like, yeah, monks don't need money, and then before in the culture in the tribe they don't need money. I'm like, but yeah, are we living in that age now? We don't live in that age. But then again, to bring to your point, like you said, you've seen people with a lot of money but they're not happy. So what are the theme you saw there? Like, why do you think they're not happy? Is it just because they have a mental ill? Why can't they be happy? Like, Michael Jackson, like, he has so much money yet he was just like, he went through so much surgery, and then like, and there's so many other celebrities who just doesn't appreciate how much money they have. So I just feel like there must have been a mental issue going on there, that they just can't appreciate money to begin with.
Well, the relationship with money can come from how you're raised. To use Michael
Yeah.
Jackson as an example, the story that I think is told the most is how much abuse the children suffered at the hands of their father. All of the Jackson
Yeah.
children, Michael Jackson potentially being the most pressured and went through that. So his self-worth and self-esteem were at risk. And eventually, it didn't really matter how much money he had, and his relationship with it was tenuous at best, because he was already suffering from mental health issues. That's a real concern. After the basics of food and shelter, et cetera, you can see that, look, celebrities, there's suicides. We've had a bunch in the last couple of years. Anthony Bourdain, I would say, one of the biggest. Was he successful? Yes. Did he make money? Yes. Was he happy? You have to think, well, probably not. So what makes somebody happy is how grounded they are, how connected, how much spirituality they have. Being grateful. If you grow up poor and then you make it big and you don't have gratitude for it, you're not going to be particularly happy. And you're certainly not going to have a good relationship with the money. So
Hmm.
again, the traumas that we go through growing up are definitely going to affect how we see things, because you can be very grateful for what you've been through, uh, and the story you have, and what it allows you to do.
Exactly. So someone said, I don't know why it says LinkedIn user. Like, I think this is a bug, but money is needed to buy only products and services, not life's experiences. My experience and friends are my real treasure. So I just want to clarify that. Then yeah, you need money to buy products and services. Sometimes some life experience doesn't cost money. Sometimes it does. And then yeah, I value my time with my friends and family. Sometimes it costs money. Sometimes it doesn't. So I do have friends who does not have a lot of money. Sometimes they're always broke and stuff like that, and then they don't want to seek help, and that's like none of my business. So they come to me, but they always come to me and then complain, like, they want to go on vacation, but they cannot afford to go on vacation because of that. So we can only do cheap stuff or free stuff or potluck. So in a sense, like, you still need money for some sort of life experience with your friends and family. So I do believe, like, you need a certain amount of money to be able to live a life you love, and then there's nothing wrong with that. That's the whole premise of my entire content. So I don't know if you have any comment on that.
Well, I think part of her comment I understand, because there is, I think after the basics, it is relative. I know lots of people who don't have a lot of money compared to what we might think other people have, and they're happy as hell. And why? Did they have a lot of great trips? No. Did they make the most of what they had? Yes. Were they really grounded in the emotional connection and bonds they had as a family? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And those things really matter. And that's getting missed across the board. Part of why I believe we actually have a mental health crisis.
Yeah, exactly. And then also, like, I think, like, I always talk about in my content about the figure out your happy money number. Like today I talk about don't compare yourself. Or was it no, that was yesterday. Stop. The only person you should compare yourself to is the person you were yesterday. Because too often I've got clients, they want to buy a house because they're like, oh, all my friends have houses, and then like, oh, I want to buy a Tesla, oh, because some of my friends have Tesla. But then the thing is that, stop comparing yourself, because you just don't know. Because I have two clients who actually like a couple client, like, she has two houses. She has a $2 million house and an $800,000 house. So when she came to me, she was worried because her savings seems to be going down every single month, even though they have a lot of money. But then, like, after we analyzed everything, they just couldn't afford a $2 million house. So after spending so much money on upgrading, make it so beautiful, it's on the hill, they have to sell it. they made the conclusion they have to sell it. They just cannot afford it. So they might, to other people, they might look like they have it all. They have a good job, two kids, beautiful wife, and then successful husband, and then they have Tesla and they have a nice car, whatever. But you just don't know. You just don't know anyone's
Yeah.
situation. So
Yeah.
you just compare yourself to yourself, to you yesterday, last week, last month, whatever, and then figure out what's your happy money number. What makes you happy? Like you said, like Jason, like if like that life experience doesn't cost money make you happy, then okay, then you don't need millions of dollars. I feel like the rat race in corporate America has to do because they think they need a lot more money than they should. And then, like, I don't know, I'm never a fan of corporate America. I don't know if you ever were in corporate America, but I've always been in corporate America for a long time, and then I just quit my job last year, and I just never liked that. I just feel like there's always this corporate politics, always moving up. We always had a boss, and that's why when I quit my job, like I've never been happier. It's been 1 year now, and I just love this. So, and I don't know, do you have employees coming to you for do you have a lot of employee clients, and then do you see like any theme there, like they're just not happy with their corporate life, they're stressed, like what's your experience with them?
Well, my experience historically, whether I was a trainer, I was a personal trainer for years before I became a therapist, and since becoming a therapist, there are lots of people who have the job, the 9 to 5 or the 9 to 8, depending on how many hours they worked. They weren't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily happier. The CEOs seemed to be okay, but a lot of people were
Mm-hmm.
struggling to balance family time, themselves, their self-care. And what they don't understand at first is why they were doing it. And before you know it, they realize they're not happy. They've been trying to keep up the rat race, as you say. And all of a sudden, they have to rethink their values and what they're doing, because that's what they've been doing. They've been meeting this comparative standard, and they're no happier for it. It doesn't really hit the 5 main areas of wellness that somebody needs: emotional, physical, intellectual, social, and spiritual. If you're not meeting those, you're going to struggle.
Yeah. Okay, I'm really just reading the comments. I think some people are having fun. They're having their own conversations.
Could be.
Okay, what did I'm more gift, more clothes than I have clothes. Well, Rocky, you can sell that. I actually have a couple client. One client loved to collect clothes, and sometimes there's still tags there. And then so we were talking about they were needing some more money on their budget. So I actually gave them a suggestion. Why don't you sell those clothes that still have tags? So I don't know. Maybe you can still sell some of that, Rocky, if you want, or unless you want to have a museum of clothes. So that's up to you. Whatever makes you happy. Okay, good for you, Christine. Okay, don't we experience wealth to be able to control potential financial wealth? What if we didn't have the right parenting? Okay, I'll let you answer that, Jason, if you want.
What was the question?
Don't we have experience to be able to control potential financial wealth? What if we didn't have the right parenting?
It's a great question. If you didn't have the right parenting, I think that's where you really need to dig into understanding it. That's a good reason to speak to a counselor, is to really understand what that effect was on you, so you can then flip it around. No different than if you didn't have, let's say, expert parenting growing up and you want to be a parent, you're going to have to figure out what to do to make sure you don't repeat the problems of the past. You want to make sure that trauma doesn't lead into the future. That's a very important thing with therapy.
Yep, yep. Okay, great question, Christine. Okay, Rocky said, if I could purchase a Bugatti, I'd want my parents to enjoy it and I'd borrow it sometimes. I drive a car that may go. All right, Rocky. Okay, we should comfort people who don't have good parenting. Okay, really revolves around money. There are many other factors that contributes in mental wellness. Money is just one of those. The key is about how you want to treat yourself and of course how you let people support you. Yep. All right.
Great.
So okay. So okay, so tell me more about so you so you were talking about your parents, you were talking about I also see parents that struggle with different value system, particular relationship to body struggle in the relationship and in the parenting. Can you talk more about that? Like yeah, this struggle?
Well, I think if we're talking about a two-parent home, which again is not the norm anymore, years ago it was, but now they say the divorce rate's 50 something percent, and I argue that it's actually higher because there's a percentage of people that actually cannot or won't get divorced. they might financially not be able to handle it, so they stay together and they're
Oh,
unhappy.
wow.
When you have a two-parent home, the most important thing is that the parents agree on the style of parenting, and they agree on how the discipline and or consequences are going to be handed out. And I would argue that the
Mhm.
bulk of the work that I do is dealing with parents who do not agree on how to manage the child. That value system is critical, and I think that's the difference. What I find is one parent goes behind the back of the other, and they undermine one another, and then they end up fighting. And then what happens is money becomes an issue for the family, and then they really have problems.
Yep. Money right there, another issue. So in the all the couples that come to you, or like people come to you, like how often do you see money being a huge problem in their mental health or in their issue just in general? Like they're having problems, with just themselves, that they come to you because they're like, money stressing them out is the main cause of why they're coming to you.
Usually I dig into it, and if I do my homework, I'll find out it's related to something else. Money is an issue, but it's not the issue. It looks like the
Got it.
issue, but I don't usually
Okay.
believe that it is. Because
Got it.
if it's a real issue, you can manage it well unless you have a different value system on what you're doing. So
Hmm.
that's where the divide between the couple usually is. I dig into
Got it.
that.
Got it. So you the divorce rate, like you said that is much higher. So do you think like money, how what's the percentage that money is the reason people divorce?
It's funny you say that. My supervisor said something to me a long time ago, which I never forgot. And he said the world revolves around sex and credit. And what he meant by that,
Yeah.
as I understood it, was if couples are having sex regularly and they have good credit, they tend to be happier. I would
Mhm.
argue that a lot of couples who struggle on the way money is spent. I think the value system, it's not the number, it's the value system related to it. So one might be more of a spendthrift, and one might be a little more like to spend a little bit more on luxuries. And that divide right there, you're going to have a problem because it's related to your value system. So I would argue that money is going to be a mitigating factor very often.
Mhm.
Whether it's the factor, I don't know. It'll look like it's the factor, but when you dig in, it's something bigger.
Got it. Got it. That's interesting to hear from your perspective. So okay, so you're talking about gratitude, having watched my parents with nothing and grow their careers and businesses, I was taught the value of health even more so, and I'm okay with spending more for self-care. So, yeah, tell me more about that. Like, like I'm also so big on gratitude. Like I'm really like, about what about money are you grateful for? What are you grateful for in life every day? So like for me, I'm always grateful for being an entrepreneur every single day. I'm grateful I'm able to wake up whenever I want to. I can, I can just block a day off whenever I want to. So I am thankful for the every day. I'm thankful for, my pets every day, my two dogs that I get to cuddle them, because I'm working from home. I actually love working from home. I think some people are struggling with the working from home because I don't know, maybe they're not having enough interaction, but I get so much interaction from, from social media, or like we have this video. So there's no reason to I don't know, to feel lonely, whatever, at this time. There's just so many ways to connect, and people are so lively in the comments. Thank you guys, I love it. So yeah, tell me more about that. So it looks like you were raised pretty well by your parents, like, they grow from nothing. And then I think my mentor, my aunt, she moved here to the US, with nothing. Like, I'm Chinese, I was born and raised in the Philippines. And then if I was, if I stayed there, and never came here, I would never be as successful, because it's so hard to be successful there. I mean, like now, I mean, let's say the worst case scenario, I don't know, I became broke, whatever, like I don't have any money. I can just go to the Philippines and I can live like a queen on like $1,000 or less a month. So it's like, so I'm so glad I came here, and then she came here with nothing, and then because of her, she was able to move us here, right? So yeah, it's like I really, I these people are, I really look up to people who create something from nothing. So why don't you share with us your story about this?
Well, for me, the experience was I happen to know the story to a high degree of my parents. I know where where my grandparents came from on both sides. I know where my parents came through. My father is the child was the child of two people who lived through the Great Depression. My mother was born basically at the end of the Holocaust. So I understand what my grandparents went through. That was not lost on me when I was growing up. And I happen to, when you talk about gratitude, I understand that my parents met on a blind date, actually. The odds
Oh,
of, yeah,
wow.
the odds of my parents meeting were the odds of being born as a human being are pretty, almost impossible. However, when your
Yeah.
parents meet on a blind date, it's probably a little bit more so. So I understand the story that they came from. So we were very much taught that we should be having gratitude just for the fact we have a family that cares about one another. I would have to argue also that my parents were very good at one thing, staying on the
Mm-hmm.
same page. While they had
Oh,
different
I love it.
personalities, I know for fact
Oh,
one didn't undermine the other. And I think if they had, that would have been really bad. I really believe that.
oh,
So
yeah. How
that part of it, they got really well.
how old are your parents now?
My mother is, she's going to see this and she's going to kill me. I'm going to say she's a little, you know what, I'm going to say it this way. I'm 50. I'm going to say that. I'm going to give my age. I'm 50. I'm 50.
Okay.
My
Okay.
father,
No,
my
I
father,
did. I was
my
just
father.
I didn't mean the exact number, just like around because like that's like the way you share is like such a sweet story about your parents. I love it. I it just
Hey,
seems like they have a very good marriage. Hmm.
my father passed away years ago, but
Oh.
I watched two parents who very much supported each other in their careers. So and
Oh.
you mentioned before about investing in things that are for your self care. I believe even when my parents didn't have a lot of money.
Hmm.
Self care was still important. I remember my father buying very good running shoes. I think he bought New Balance sneakers for he and my mother when, I don't know what they had, financially, I know they didn't have much, but taking care of their
Oh.
physical bodies was really important. So the value of
Yep.
self care is an
Yep.
important one. And I think that's one that a lot of families actually struggle with. I'm grateful that I actually don't have that struggle. I understand
Yep.
that I'll put my money there. I don't need a Lamborghini. I'll take a pair of
Yep.
New Balance though.
Yep. Yep. So when you say self-care, like what I mean why do people struggle with that? Like like I like I think like the easiest self-care is gratitude, and for me like I like to my massage, well now not anymore nowadays. So I like to go jogging, I like to walk my dogs, pet my dog. So like why do people struggle with that? Like do they have like a self-esteem issue, or like maybe I mean maybe just teach them gratitude, and then just like to actually just something simple, right? What are you the three things you're grateful for in life? So what do you think?
I mean, that's a good practice. I think when people don't take self
Mhm.
care seriously or they're afraid to, there's something they haven't dealt with that led to it. And it may actually be, to go back to it, something traumatic that taught
Yeah,
them
yeah,
some lesson that they're not worth it. So, if it's a value
exactly.
system in your home, you're more likely to espouse it. I think the lessons that parents teach best are the ones they model, not the ones where they're, yelling and
Mm.
pointing at their child. Don't do this. I used to joke that I never got the drug talk. My parents never had that talk. Don't
Yeah,
do drugs with me. It was a given that it wasn't going to happen.
yeah.
You just,
Yep,
you knew.
yep.
So how a parent
Got it.
models that behavior, if the parent takes care of their health, the child's going to watch it.
Yeah.
Just the same, if they do the opposite, they're going to watch that too. And we never know how that's going to go.
Yep, got it. And then Kenneth's so funny. He's like, sex and credit. Okay, actually, because you said that Kenneth actually, okay, this is something that like when people are dating, I always post this a lot. So don't be afraid to talk about money. I feel like people like when they're dating, like I mean, like just in the beginning stage, even like if you go to a couple of dates, then you want to start talking about money, like maybe who's gonna start paying for the bill, what's the agreement. So because I have female I know my well they're not really friends, but I know my female people like I hang out with, like they always expect the man to pay for everything. And then I was like it's like the, and then for me, like I feel like women nowadays, they sometimes they make as much as men. So I think, like you have to talk about it. Some men might not want that unless you go with a very old fashioned guy who like, oh, I gotta pay for everything, macho. So like that's a very important thing, right? To talk about money. But then like sometimes people are more comfortable talking about sex, and then rather than money, they might even have sex on the first date or whatever. But money, they're like so afraid of it. So it's like, what do you think about that? Like, it's like, just start talking about money. Like, what's like people just seems to be taboo around that. And I feel like with dating, that's very important, especially with relationships. You have to have the topic. That's one of the important things to talk about, right? Not the only thing, but one of the most important things.
At some point, they're going to have to get to it. I would argue with you, in agreement with you, that people will more likely have sex on a first date than talk about money. I'm not suggesting
Yeah.
whether that's right or wrong, but I agree with you that the numbers would indicate that it's the case. I think people, because it seems like there's less commitment to some people, but to have a money talk, that's serious business. Oh no,
That's
that's a
serious.
commitment.
It's okay.
Yeah, talk about sex, no problem. I'm in.
Yeah,
Money,
yeah,
no, I'm out.
that's not commitment. That's not commitment.
That's not commitment. That's right. Right.
Oh, that's hilarious. Okay, so Ken said, I'm grateful to be alive another day to experience what life has to offer. Yes, thank you. That's such a.
Good comment.
And then Rob said more closing. Okay, so okay. Ionis, I hope I pronounced that. Sorry if I messed up your name. So, with so many entrepreneurs proudly proclaiming easy money, is also easy to dismiss gratitude. So, yes, so Ionis is yes, you have to be very careful entrepreneurs or coaches who say, "Oh yeah, I can make six figures for the easy," or like even business coaches who claim, "I can help you make six figures right away." So the people are very honest. They'll tell you is the first year you might not get to that, and then that's okay. And then like I'm gonna be very honest with you, like I don't always make 5 digit a month, and then what's important to me is that I'm profitable. Okay, so that if I'm not even profitable, I don't even break even, then I'm gonna have to go back to corporate. I told that myself that I'm gonna give it my all for the first year. If I don't even like make it in first year, I'm gonna go back to corporate. But I luckily I made it, so I'm happy. But there is
Good
not
for you.
easy being entrepreneur. You have to do everything, right? Like you have to do marketing, social media, like because if you don't market, you have no sales. If you have no sales, you have no money. If you have no money, then you have no food or shelter. So I have friends who's like they just quit their job and then went to like entrepreneurship. They're like, oh yeah, the client's gonna come, but client's not gonna show up. You have to go out there. You have to constantly show up. You can't be like shy
Right.
and then you have to show yourself. Otherwise, nobody's gonna come to you.
You
Okay.
have to be
So yeah,
you have
you
to be
you've been
vulnerable.
yes, you have been an entrepreneur your whole life, right? Like you've never been in corporate America, isn't it?
Technically speaking, I would argue I've never been corporate America. I've basically I've worked for myself almost the entire time. But the jobs that I did have, I wouldn't say are corporate America. They were small time,
Wow.
smaller and mental health based. Yeah, almost like family owned businesses. So I've never had that
Yes.
experience. And the
Yes.
only time I tried, I didn't make it anyway. I didn't even get hired for a job in
What?
corporate America. So
Okay, I want to hear that also. No, you didn't lost much, Jason.
no, I think I'm better
Okay.
for the experience.
Mostly the one that were gifted to me. I don't, okay, so I think people are having their own conversation. Thank you.
They might
Okay,
be.
so Rocky said, how much do I require in order to continue with? Okay, is that a question for us, Rocky? Okay. I'll take the ones you don't wear. Okay, so Rob said the true business coach always works on the business, building the relationship, and that can take a year before they get a good relationship going. Yep, and sometimes it takes a while to build relationship. Like that's why we're on social media to because like there's a like, know, and trust factor, right? Because you have to show up, you have to build that relationship, and then when I'm on LinkedIn, I focus on building that relationship. It's not about selling, selling, selling. Some people post a lot and then say, okay, contact me. And it's like, I don't know, after a while, that's kind of annoying. Like, I'm like, are you just trying to sell all the time? Yeah.
That happens a lot.
Okay.
I get a lot of the will help you build a six-figure business, but they don't ask me if I have a six-figure business. So they're kind of
Yeah.
missing the point ahead of the time.
Yeah, exactly. And then like they're always like, okay, then I can make you all this much money, whatever. And then like usually like so okay, this is one thing I always tell clients or tell everybody. If it sounds too good to be true, it usually is too good to be true.
Right.
Like the Bitcoin, the Forex, like I'm sorry if I bring this up, but they're kind of known for always saying, oh, I can make you $1,000 each week or $2,000 each week. I'm like, yeah, that sounds too really like can you show me your tax return or bank statement that you really have that? So it's easy for people to sell you a dream. Okay. So just, and then people
Very.
get sucked into the dream too because they want that. But be very careful. If it sounds too good to be true, it really is too good to be true.
Yes.
Okay. Let me see if there's more question. Okay. So yeah. Okay. We're coming to an hour. So yeah, if you guys have more question, please feel okay. Someone said, I got a lot of Bitcoin and Forex. Yes, that's so true. Okay, so Jason, why don't you tell people, yeah, how can people find you? Like, where do you hang out? Or do you hang out on LinkedIn, Instagram? Where?
I'd say on you can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, anything that actually has my full name, Jason Eric Ross. My
Okay.
website is jasonerickross.com. If you find me on LinkedIn, it's Jason Eric Ross. On Instagram, it's at Jason Eric Ross. Same with Twitter, and it's kind of easy to contact me. I'm on social media. I'm not famous, but I'm on it, so people can always
So,
contact me that way.
so when is your next acting? Like, do you have any movie, whatever, coming up?
That's a great question. The last gig that I did was a commercial where I'm an extra. However, there's a show that I worked on called Paper Empire, which hopefully will be airing in the next year. And I got to work with
Hmm.
some couple of very famous people. So I'm looking forward to that coming out. If you watch Discovery ID, some of the shows that I've done actually continue to play. Evil Lives Here, A Crime to Remember, The Perfect Murder. I've been on all of them. And if you're, I guess it doesn't really matter where you live. If you watch Telemundo, I was on a show called Betty and NY, which aired last year. It's sort of, I think it's the same as Ugly Betty, but it's the version they did for Telemundo. So had a nice part in that. And now I'm going to have to, sit and wait. So right now I just write and I still work on my practice regardless of what I do, because that's what I always wanted.
Hmm. Someone made it. It's a psychodrama work. Oh, work. What do you mean? In a sense that it will make people dramatic, or it's like
Psychodrama is a very intense type of training and experiential therapy. I've actually had a lot of training in it. So, but it's a really funny word to hear anytime you hear it.
cool. Okay, I guess my last question before we end: what's your favorite recent TV show or movie on Netflix? Because like my routine before bedtime is watching some movie. That's how I slow down and calm down, and that's part of my self care. So, what's your recent TV show or movie that you would recommend me and the audience?
Well, if you want to see something about mental health while it's
Mhm.
disturbing, I would watch The Joker with Joaquin Phoenix.
The Joker. What with Isn't Joker Jim Carrey, or are you talking on another
The
Joker?
the recent movie that was done. So Jim Carrey played the Riddler in one of the Batman films, but the recent film
Uh-huh.
as the standalone film Joker,
Hmm.
which he won the Oscar for. That's worth watching. That's an
Cool, cool.
intense movie, and it really highlights what's wrong with mental health.
And then is that on Amazon, Netflix?
I believe it's on Netflix now. I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Awesome. Thank you. And then thank you so much everyone for joining. Thank you so much, Jason,
Thank
for
you.
coming in. So it's like it seems like you're quite popular. Some people know you. They say you're a good guest to be on. So I'm glad you reached
Thanks.
out to me. I really appreciate this. So thank you so much everyone for joining. And then I really appreciate that. I hope everyone have a good night. And yeah, talk to you guys later. Bye, Jason.
Thank you. Bye.